Hi, hello. My name is Rowan Nelson. I'll be talking to you about social information processing theory. Social information processing theory is basically the theory that relationships grow only to the extent that parties first gain information about each other and use that information to form interpersonal impressions of who they are. So it's like you meet a person online, you start a conversation, and you can only develop as much of an idea about who this person is based on the information that they give to you, right? There is a formation of this way to composite a mental image of one person. It starts with interpersonal information, impression formation, and then the development of the relationship. There are those who believe that CMC, which is computer mediated communication, which is basically text based messages, filter out essential nonverbal cues, and they believe it is a fatal flaw for using the medium for relationship development. But Walders does not believe this. He doesn't think you lose it necessarily, or that it could even injure it. There are two features of CMC that provide the rationale for SIP theory. The first is verbal cues. When motivated to form impressions and develop relationships, communicators employ any cue system that's available. Therefore, CMC users can create impressions of others based solely on the content of online messages. And then the other aspect of it is that it's going to take a lot longer. There's an extended time. The exchange of social information through text-only CMC is much slower than it is face-to-face. So impressions are formed at a reduced rate. But given enough time, there's no reason to think that a CMC relationship will be any weaker or more fragile than those created face to face. One way of looking at SIP is through liquid analogy. You could either drink your beer, water, whatever, what have you, all at once, or you could take it one sip at a time. Drinking it all at once would be like a face to face relationship, and then taking it one sip at a time would be a relationship that has developed an extended time through messages online. One thing Walders also believes that just because there aren't any nonverbal cues, it doesn't mean that you can't replace nonverbal cues with verbal cues. CMC's users must use only text-only messages to convey those same social information. He just believes that nonverbal cues and verbal cues can be used interchangeably, which isn't as strange as you might think, because there was a time before the internet, people still sent letters, and that took an even longer time, but people have developed relationships through pen pal programs and things of that nature. A crucial variable in CMC is over an extended period of time versus how much information can be provided. Over an extended time period, the issue is not the amount of social information that can be conveyed online, rather it's the rate at which the information is received. There's about a 4-to-1 time difference in how long it takes to compose a message versus saying something in person. There are 4 different perspectives apply the idea that a CMC relationship can be more intimate than one in person. They are You can selectively self-present yourself and provide what exactly a person sees. And then there's over-attribution of similarity, which is the process whereby we observe what people do and then try to figure out what they're really like. In this instance, people communicate on their own time, and then there is a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is the tendency for a person's expectation of others to evoke the response from them that confirms what they originally anticipated. So some critiques of this theory, a critique of this theory might be that it's been focused much on online communication, but what happens is that technology changes really, really quickly. And so it doesn't really consider web-based video or messaging in massively multiplayer online games. Yet, another critique might be that some of the studies suggest that online relationships form at the same pace or even faster than they do for people who meet face to face, which contradicts one of SIP's central claims. And then there's also the idea where he purposely calls his hyper-personal perspective a perspective rather than a theory, because a good theory should offer a central explanatory mechanism, which his hyper-personal perspective does not. So I guess the question becomes, where is social information processing theory going? Well, one thing that might be considered is that on how avatars affect the social information processing theory. According to According to Novak, in an article in a scholarly paper he wrote in 2000, visual information may be used in forming impressions of others online. And the graphic form of an avatar, like a Facebook picture or whatever, did have an effect on the uncertainty about physical attractiveness. It's the idea that maybe the person you were talking to is not exactly the person you thought you were talking to. And then there's also the idea of chronemics and social information processing theory. Chronemics play a very important part in that it was found that the amount of time that it takes for a person to respond directly influences what a person thinks about you. It was found that the more extroverted a person is with the shorter pauses, the more agreeable he is. But the longer the pauses were associated with more agreeable players, but it was also associated with decreased trust. It is also found that the idea of the hyperpersonal perspective dictates that a person can put forth only the best of themselves while leaving the rest hidden. I would wonder if maybe possibly that could be expanded on even further to the point that maybe you could argue you really have no idea who you're talking to in, like, say, a random message board. Like, you could not necessarily prove that you are not talking to a cat, which I just think is an interesting idea to think about, because it's not even just cats. It could be cats, dogs, whatever. But the point is like, what if you were talking to a robot? Or how are you supposed to be able to tell that who you are talking to really is who they are? So I believe it certainly is hyper-personal. Anyway, that's all I had to talk about for social information processing theory today. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.